All right, guys, today I'm super excited because I'm going to give you everything that's necessary in order to jumpstart your recovery process from pornography in 2026 so you can understand exactly what root dysfunctions or dependencies are driving the behavior so you can disrupt the mental and emotional and physiological patterns to replace them with the proper methodologies based on your exact root issues to start rewiring desire back toward natural pleasure today. Let's go. We're going to be getting into a document that I've titled Custom Plan Info because this is really what's required in order to actually assimilate the proper process in your situation from knowledge delegating downward into action. So you actually have tangible boxes that you can tick off daily toward real progress and recovery. So let's begin. When mapping out the correct exercises and things to do to prioritize in your daily routines, we got to remember the most proficient things will depend on one of two things, either desire or temptation. So what does this mean and why? Well, essentially, here's a bit of a diagram that describes desire versus temptation. Desire is internal. It's something that drives the behavior intrinsically. So things like loneliness, need for intimacy, need for comfort, stress regulation, meaning, hunger. If you treat desire as temptation, you will fail every time. Temptation is external. So it is situations, people, places, things, social media, images, ads, being alone, availability, opportunity. If you treat temptation as desire, you'll start to shame yourself. So how is this actually, let's say, delegated downward into a recovery process, into real action rather than just knowledge, as said earlier? Well, technically, they're two completely different things. Temptation is defined as oppression, something you must resist from the outside that's calling you into the pornography if you look at the original translations of the term. So epithemia in Greek means desire. This is the root word that it comes from that inspired our modern English word. And perasmos in Greek means temptation. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but forgive me. So desire something, again, that we possess inwardly that drives us to do one of two things. And this is going to be the key in your long-term recovery success. We either are enticed or we are repulsed. So by understanding which one hinders us the most, we can explore the route toward real recovery. For desire, when we understand why we do something, like the core desire that it's birthed from, we can actually go about rewiring that desire. So that's the root cause. For our lower nature, this is intimacy. We recognize it must remain in the correct context. Therefore, the definition of, as you see on the screen, the word is the alternate version of something. And I'm going to try to keep this PG-13 as much as possible. I don't want to get censored. But pornography happens to be the alternate version of sex. So it draws that desire out of the correct context, right? So by this nature, we understand the inward desire for intimacy and connection has been rewired or distorted to desire the pornography. So this is mentioned in the empirical literature itself on a dichotomy. Many psychological models assimilate to this, but addiction is the opposite of connection. Vice is the opposite of virtue. Dependency is the opposite of responsibility. So here's a little bit of a diagram here that describes this in a bit more depth. The choice isn't moral, it's developmental. So many models that we use to employ methodology here actually describe this as a process from adolescence to adulthood. Wilhelm Reich's characterology is one example. It describes stressors, traumas, and experiences actually shaping our physiological character structure based on how we cope through those experiences in our developmental stages. A lot of times, as guys grow up, this is what creates an over-reliance on external gratification, extrinsic gratification, like pornography. So we see the dependency mode cycle, externally regulated nervous system. Internal discomfort, like stress, boredom, and loneliness, leads to an aversion of tension, seeking external relief, the dopamine escape, temporary calming, and then an increased dependency. So it's characterized by vice and escapism, instant gratification, and improper coping mechanisms. Excuse me. Overcoming a bit of a cold, but this is important to note for later. This is the path toward growth. So responsibility on the opposing end of the spectrum is an internally regulated nervous system, not reliant on anything outside of us that's going to cause a detriment in our lives, but the internal discomfort, such as stress, boredom, and loneliness, leading to tolerance of tension, right? And there are certain ways to do this based on what problems you actually struggle with. And we're going to get into exactly what specific ones you might be experiencing and exactly what to do in the place of them. So we also have the internal containment, the meaningful action, right, that leads to a stable regulation and increased capacity. So it's characterized by virtue and discipline. Virtue is action based on what we value, delayed gratification, and proper coping. So the tension is metabolized, which means processed. So how do we begin identifying these patterns? Well, they could be physical, somatic structures in the body, in the mind, psychological, mental, and emotional. But there's a common denominator here. So we can see this level of dependency and autonomy model in relationship to behavioral addiction. So you can see dependency and autonomy both on the vertical axis and the level on the lateral axis. So interpret this on your own discretion based on your situation. But we see direction, self-direction, and self-determination as the particular levels. Which one leads to autonomy? Well, mostly self-direction and self-determination. Direction without these particular qualities is only going to lead to furthering dependency. The problem is a lot of guys don't know where to go specifically. So we're going to point you in the right direction here. The question you can discern where this pattern comes up is these questions. Where do you notice the desire rise in the body or mind out of these three areas? Number one, in the head, the thinking nature. As Wilhelm Reich would say, the schizoid. Thoughts are leading you astray, back into temptation. Number two would be the heart, the emotive center of the body, or the feeling-based nature. The desire presents itself more in the solar plexus, which is the center of the body, the emotional center, or the upper abdomen. And number three would be the more carnal bodily desire for release. For men, this is usually always involved, and you could probably put together the pieces as to what I mean here. So it could be one of these or all of these, and when a temptation triggers you, where does the pattern present itself? This is the most important part to get right, because if we don't understand what we're actually facing in the context of temptation or desire, then we're not going to be able to fight it from the right areas. You're just going to be using willpower, blockers, accountability with nothing to stay accountable toward, misdirected direction, right, as described in the analysis above. So if we don't know where to go, we're going to be putting all of our force toward the wrong areas. So we need to know exactly what direction we need to be pointed in based on our specific problems. So this is how we firstly begin to target the areas needed during the methodological practices. So this is why willpower fails in recovery, guys. So desire can lead to integration, which allows us to process, regulate, and choose. So it's some form of mindfulness where we're actually discerning what's going on and we're able to take the correct course of action by bringing our conscious values into focus. This is the proper decision-making process that leads us to purpose, movement, connection, and this is desire under self-control, right? Desire, the biological urge, and some form of loneliness or dysregulation leads to desire under self-control, which leads to suppression, fear, avoid, control, obsession, compulsion, and relapse. So you see how this cycle leads to the urges only strengthening, because it feels as if the thing that caused the problem to begin with is going to be the only thing that can help solve it. But that's just simply not true, because it's only very, very temporary. And sorry for the ice maker making some noise in the back there. But here's another great way to discern right away if this is showing up more in patterns of thoughts or more so structured somatically within the body. Where do you notice this rising the most? Right? It can be visually or audibly, which is usually associated with temptation outwardly, or inward thoughts or feelings, desire in the body, right? And understanding exactly where that's coming up for you. So this gives us a firm base to work from and understanding what we're actually up against most of the time. And this gives us the ability to accentuate the proper practices and firm boundaries accordingly. So temptation outwardly leads to thoughts coming in. The mental and emotional relapse framework is referenced here. We're not going to go into all that today, but I'm going to lead you through the necessary frameworks in order to succeed. So recovery and identity healing is the following step. Usually we start identifying with the actions that we take that conflict our conscious values that are associated with dependency. To flip the script, we need to step into the identity based on our values today, because what we do isn't necessarily who we are. But it plays a huge part in how our psyche is actually formatted to how we perceive ourselves and how we interact with others in the world, etc. This is why you feel a lack of confidence, inability to interpersonally function in relationships, etc., etc. So we need to start identifying based on acting in line with what we truly value. The fractured identity model is as follows. This is just who I am. I always mess up. I'll never change. This can change, right? Acting against values. The shift in perspective essentially here is who you are is not what you've done, right? We got to separate identity from behavior. And this leads to the healing identity and the whole process here by starting to shift the decision-making process and how we actually treat the physiological compulsion or the outward temptation. We start to reconnect with our values, not based on what we've done in the past or
how we perceive ourselves now, even, we have to reconnect with those values that are ordered toward a particular outcome. Like, who do we want to be, and who does quitting this actually lead us to become, that leads to aligned actions, and then eventually recovery and freedom. Recovery means we're recovering what was lost here, guys, right? So this is very important to understand. And I'm going to give you everything here that you need in order to succeed, to start today in the strongest way you absolutely possibly can. So to give you a preface before we actually get into what to do, we all have a physiological structure in our bodies that stores emotions associated with experiences. And this is what's referred to as our character structure by Dr. Wilhelm Reich. I'm not going to read all this, but we're just going to make sure you understand. In the field of psychoanalysis or psychodynamic practice, he studied how to move through these neurotic holding patterns of emotion that become structured in the body. Neurotic means nervous system. So emotion is derived from the Latin word emovere, which means to move, agitate, or stir. So emotions are not meant to be suppressed with an improper coping mechanism associated with dependency, right? This is what happens, especially during immature levels of development. If you come across this early, right? We get in the cycle of suppressing emotions with extrinsic things that then we become overly reliant or dependent on. So we need to shift to the responsibility aspects with employing the proper coping mechanisms based on your root problem. I'm going to show you in just a minute, to actually begin to satiate the root need and rewire the dependency back toward self-responsibility and reorder that desire back toward natural pleasure. This is when the core no longer becomes an issue for you, which is beautiful. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, neurotic holding patterns are essentially the process of these emotions getting stunted from physical expression. So they get locked in the body. So we need to understand and work to release these holding patterns associated with the desire with an addiction directly, right? So this is intrinsic. Wilhelm Reich is a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who believed that sexual energy is a key component of human psychology and behavior, as many models of the psyche subscribe to. So he developed a theory of characterology, sought to understand the ways in which individuals repress or express their emotions that lead to compulsion. So his theories offer insights into the underlying psychological and physical factors that contribute to addictive behaviors. So this is the last paragraph I'll read, but Reich believed that individuals who are unable to express the proper desire or transmute desires, as we said, metabolize in the proper ways through proper coping and other methodologies, then you'll turn to addictive behaviors as ways of coping. So by understanding the root causes of addiction in terms of repressed desires and emotions, we can actually better address the patterns of compulsive behavior by targeting and replacing them. Therefore, eventually rewiring the inward desire back toward natural pleasure once again. So give me just 1 second here, guys. I'm going to pull up exactly what you need on the screen to start identifying what presenting problems you actually struggle with, so that then you can coordinate the proper methodologies based on these root dysfunctions and issues. So this is in a document listed, Custom Plan Part 3. There's a lot more information, but really what matters is the correct implementation based on your specific problem. So I'm going to pull this up here, and how to begin to actually rewire it. So there are 5 main character types. You may share traits in one of these or all of these, but there are lists of typical presenting problems based on these experiences that are described above. So go through the typical presenting problems in all of them. The first few that are listed here with the schizoid type, number 1, are lack of feelings, numbness, little to no joy or pleasure in life, inability to engage in intimate relationships, etc., etc. And they're very self-explanatory. You could probably assimilate them to yourself by yourself. Obviously, it helps to have somebody in your corner helping you discern these things in particular based on, outward reflection. But this is something that I'm giving you complete access to be able to actually start building in what will work for you in your situation. So I would say how you actually start building this is based on these presenting problems. Don't worry about the personal functioning beliefs and higher self-estimate. Sorry, I'm trying to get through this real quick. Don't worry about those right now. Those will come later. Start implementing the actual tasks that are listed based on the presenting problems that are described above. There are going to be a mixture of psychological and physical exercises. You can look up exactly how to perform these yourself, but I would say segment them throughout the day in specific ways so that you know exactly what you're doing. You're organizing and tracking them properly so you can have measurable progress to discern what you need to continue doing and what you need to discard. So based on this, you're going to actually have something to do, some way to cope, some way to express emotion based on each situation. And you can make this as specific as down to even each level of temptation, which is the beautiful part of this. So
Each of these exercises is going to put you in the best possible position based on those actual root dysfunctions that are described to actually start seeing real results in real life. And I hope this has helped, guys. There are documents. Both of these documents are listed down below. I'm giving you all the juice here, guys. You just need to do it. It's going to be comprehensive. It's going to be challenging. There's the ice maker again. But it's going to be one of the most rewarding things that you could ever do in your life. I promise you. Think of who you can actually be as a result of your values in your life if you actually start acting in line with them. What type of relationship, what type of opportunity, what type of friends, what type of job, what type of life can you produce? And also the anti-vision, what kind of life is using corn continually pulling you toward? So I've given you the frameworks, I've given you the tools. All you need to do is go ahead and start applying this, guys. So let me know if you're struggling in any particular way, see if I can help. If you came from Instagram, really appreciate you checking out the content, bro. And I'll keep you posted. I'll keep pumping stuff out like this, and I'll keep giving you everything that I can possibly do as you got to become, a servant of all, as Jesus Christ says in the scripture, and to Peter, feed my sheep, right? To be the greatest among thee. And I think one of the primary aspects of this mission is to give as much as I possibly can. So I hope this has helped today, guys. God bless you in Jesus' name. We'll be speaking very soon. Like, comment, share, subscribe if this helped you, and share this with a friend, right? If you know somebody in your corner who's struggling, and you see the value that's packed in here, and just taking action, how much this can change your life, go ahead and share it with a friend right now. And we'll be speaking soon, guys. God bless each of you.